Dear students, in this video, we are going to discuss about coding standards. Coding standards. Programmers spend more time reading code than writing code. They spend a lot of time to read code than writing code. They read their own code as well as other programmers' code. So that's why the code should have a readability. That code should be readability and understandability. That should have a readability and understandability. Suppose if you use some coding conventions and coding standards, it enhances the readability of the code. So we have to follow some standards and we have to use some uniformity and we have to use some conventions, common conventions, so that it enhances the readability of the code. So generally coding standards regarding to the name, file organization, statements, declarations, etc. So if you use coding standards, it increases the readability of the code so that other programmers can understand easily. So it increases the code clarity and program clarity, and it enhances the understandability of the code. Here we are going to discuss some Java conventions, naming conventions. In Java, package name should be in a lowercase. This is one of the coding standard. We have to follow this. What is the use of following coding standards? Two uses. One is it increases the coding clarity and it enhances the readability and it enhances the uh, understandability. Naming conventions. Package name should be in a lowercase. Type names, that means that should be nouns and start with uppercase. Variable names should be known and it should be in a lowercase. Loop iterates should be small letters. Constant names should be all capital letters. Method name should be verbs and that should be starts with lowercase. This is an example. Get value. That should start with lowercase letter. These are related to the naming conventions. Files. Source files should have the proper extensions. That is a .java. So anyone can easily find that it is a Java related code. Each file should contain one outer class and the name of the outer class should be same as file name. Line length should be less than 80. That should be less than 80. If it exceeds 80, we have to continue the another line. A longer line should continue on another line. This is related to the files. Statements variables should be initialized where declared in the smallest possible scope. That should be initialized to some value. Class variables should never be declared public because variables, if it is declared as public, anyone can access it to the outside world. It is easily accessible to the outside world, so that's why it should be private or protected. It should not be a public. Its scope should not be a public. Loop variables should be initialized just before the loop. Yes, obviously it should be initialized to some value before iteration starts. Avoid as much as possible break and continue statements in loop because break and continue statements change the nature of looping statements. So avoid executable statements in conditionals. Try to avoid do while construct because it is a post conditional loop statement. So this is related to the statements. Yes, we have to use comments, single line comments and multi-line comments. It enhances the readability of the code and it enhances the understandability of the code. Anyone can easily understand. Suppose if you comment the variables related to variables, so people can understand it and other programmers or other developers can understand it for what purpose people have used uh, these variable, and trailing comments after the statements, after every statements, trailing comments after every statement, that should be short, that should be on the same line. Trailing comments after the statement, that should be short, and that should be on another, that should be on the same line, so that other programmers, other developers, testers, and maintenancers can understand for what purpose programmer have used this statement. So it increases the readability of the code and understandability of the code. So we have to use the comments, single line comments or multi-line comments. So coding standards, obviously it is the required, it's essentially required to increase the clarity of the code. Uh, Obviously after the coding phase, testing phase and maintenance phase comes. So that's why uh, testers, sometimes testers also will read the code, and the maintenancers also will read the code. So that's why we have to follow some standards so anyone can easily understand it. So naming conventions, some naming standards, some standards related to files, some standards related to statements, and comment section. These are all related to the coding standards. Thank you.